Ah, public holidays, those magical days where we pretend to celebrate something while secretly just being stoked about not working. And what better occasion to indulge in this national charade than Workers' Day? But here's the thing, my fellow comrades in relaxation, while we're out there grilling Boer wars and avoiding DIY projects, there's a whole lot about the history of Workers' Day in South Africa that's often swept under the rug. Trust me, it's a lot less festive and a lot more, shall we say, thought-provoking. So buckle up your safety belts because in this video, we're diving headfirst into the murky depths of Workers' Day, unearthing those conveniently forgotten facts with a healthy dose of humor. Get ready to have your minds blown wider than Eskom's budget during load shedding because things are about to get real quick. Workers' Day, or May Day, has its roots in the labor movement. It started in the late 19th century with US workers fighting for an 8-hour workday. This idea spread globally, leading to demands for better working conditions. In South Africa, Workers' Day symbolizes ongoing struggle rather than celebration. Remember the generations who fought for the rights we enjoy today. So picture this. It's the early 20th century in South Africa. The sun's shining, the birds are singing, and the workers are, well, they're working a lot. We're talking longer hours than a Kardashian marriage under conditions that would make a health inspector faint. Back in the day, the concept of workers' rights was about as popular as a vegan braai in Texas. Workers, especially those from marginalized communities, were treated more like replaceable cogs in a machine than actual human beings. Wages were about as appealing as a plate of lukewarm pap, safety regulations were non-existent, and if you dared to complain, well, let's just say your next job was likely to be disappeared person. But amidst this bleak landscape, a glimmer of hope emerged. Workers, emboldened by the global labor movement, started organizing, forming unions, and demanding rights. The response from the government and the ruling class was about as welcoming as a swarm of locusts at a picnic. But despite the uphill battle, these early labor movements laid the groundwork for the struggles to come. Okay folks, buckle up because we're about to dive into a chapter of South African history that's as heavy as a bag of potatoes after a public holiday braai, the Sharpeville Massacre. Picture this. March 21, 1960, Sharpeville, a township near Vereeniging, is buzzing with activity. Thousands of people have gathered to protest against the dreaded pass laws, a cornerstone of the apartheid regime's oppressive system. These pass laws weren't just about controlling movement, they were about controlling labor, ensuring a readily available pool of cheap black labor for the white minority government and businesses. The police, armed to the teeth and fueled by a potent cocktail of racism and fear, opened fire on the unarmed crowd. The result? 69 people dead, including women and children, and countless others injured. The Sharpeville Massacre sent shockwaves across the globe, exposing the true face of apartheid and igniting international condemnation. Trade unions versus apartheid. It's like David versus Goliath, but with more red tape. Now let's talk about the unsung heroes of the anti-apartheid struggle: trade unions. Under apartheid, trade unions were more than just organizations fighting for better wages and working conditions. They were hotbeds of resistance, breeding grounds for revolutionary thought. These unions, often operating in the shadows, facing harassment, intimidation, and even violence, played a pivotal role in mobilizing workers, organizing strikes, and challenging the very foundations of the apartheid system. One of the most significant contributions of trade unions was their role in the formation of the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, in 1985. This federation of unions brought together workers from various sectors under a single banner, creating a formidable force that the apartheid government could no longer ignore. COSATU, along with other anti-apartheid organizations, played a key role in the mass strikes and protests that crippled the South African economy in the 1980s, forcing the government to the negotiating table and paving the way for the eventual fall of apartheid. The Marikana Massacre, a post-apartheid tragedy, you bet. Now let's fast forward to 2012, a time when we thought, rather naively, that massacres were a relic of our dark past. Enter the Marikana Massacre, a stark reminder that some things, sadly, never change. August 16, 2012. Marikana, a mining town in the Northwest Province, becomes etched in our collective memory for all the wrong reasons. Miners, striking for better wages and living conditions, faced off against the police who, armed with live ammunition, opened fire on the unarmed crowd. The result? 34 miners dead, 78 injured, and a nation left reeling in shock and disbelief. The Marikana massacre exposed the raw underbelly of inequality and exploitation that continued to plague the country, even after the demise of apartheid. It was a brutal wake-up call, a stark reminder that the fight for economic justice was far from over. Ongoing issues, because who needs a break when you can have exploitation? Alright folks, let's take a look at the current state of play for workers in South Africa. Despite the end of apartheid and the promises of a more just and equitable society, the reality for many workers in South Africa is still a far cry from ideal. Wage inequality? Still rife. Unsafe working conditions? Check. Exploitation of vulnerable workers? You bet. From farm workers facing grueling hours and appalling living conditions to factory workers exposed to hazardous materials without proper protection, the list of injustices faced by South African workers is long. And let's not forget about the gaping chasm between the haves and the have-nots. South Africa boasts one of the highest levels of income inequality in the world, making it a playground for the rich and a never-ending obstacle course for the poor. Now let's talk about a particularly vulnerable group of workers in South Africa: immigrant workers. These are the people who often do the jobs that South Africans don't want to do for wages that would make a miser blush. They come from all over the continent, seeking a better life, only to find themselves caught in a system that seems designed to exploit and marginalize them. From being paid less than their South African counterparts for the same work to facing discrimination and abuse from employers, immigrant workers often bear the brunt of South Africa's economic woes. And then there's the xenophobia, that ugly beast that rears its head every now and then, reminding us that for some, Ubuntu is just a word in a dictionary, not a way of life. It's a vicious cycle. Immigrant workers are scapegoated for the country's problems, leading to further marginalization and exploitation, which, in turn, fuels more xenophobia. So, you might be thinking, surely after all these years, South Africa must have some pretty stellar labor laws in place to protect workers, right? Well, you'd be right, kind of. On paper, South Africa's labor laws look pretty decent. But the problem, as always, lies in the implementation, or lack thereof. From employers finding loopholes in the law faster than you can say unfair dismissal to workers being too afraid to report violations for fear of losing their jobs, the reality is that many of these well-intentioned laws end up being about as effective as a chocolate teapot in a heat wave. And don't even get me started on the glacial pace of reform. So while South Africa may have come a long way in terms of labor rights, there's still a long way to go. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the braai stand in the backyard. You know, that thing we all gather around on Workers' Day, pretending to celebrate the working class while conveniently ignoring the struggles faced by so many. For many South Africans, Workers' Day has become synonymous with long weekends, braais, and sales at the mall. The reality is that for many workers in South Africa, Workers' Day is just another day of toil, another day of struggling to make ends meet, another day of being invisible in a system that seems designed to keep them that way. So, while you're out there enjoying your extra day of freedom, spare a thought for those who aren't so fortunate, those who are still fighting for the rights that many of us take for granted. Remember, true solidarity goes beyond posting a hashtag on social media. It's about amplifying the voices of the marginalized, challenging injustice wherever you see it, and using your privilege to create a more just and equitable society for all. Alright folks, I know what you're thinking. Shady, this is all very depressing. Is there any hope for the future of workers in South Africa? And to that, I say, of course there's hope. We're South Africans, we invented hope. Despite the challenges, there are glimmers of hope on the horizon. From grassroots movements to trade unions, the spirit of resistance is alive. The road ahead may be long, but a better future is possible. It's a future where every worker is treated with dignity and respect. Well, there you have it folks, a crash course in the not-so-rosy side of Workers' Day in South Africa. We've journeyed from the dark days of apartheid to the equally murky waters of post-apartheid exploitation, all while trying to maintain a sense of humor. But jokes aside, the fight for workers' rights is no laughing matter. It's a fight that continues to this day, a fight for dignity, for fairness, for a future where every worker is valued and respected. So the next time you fire up that braai or indulge in a little retail therapy on Workers' Day, take a moment to remember those who came before us, those who fought for the rights we often take for granted, and those who continue to fight for a better future. And with that, I'm off to enjoy the rest of my public holiday, because hey, even revolutionaries need a break. Until next time, stay woke, stay informed, and try not to get scammed by a Black Friday sale.